Chapter 1. The Numbers Game. Adam Noles stared at the spreadsheet glowing on his monitor like it held the secrets of the universe. Didn't. It held account numbers. Rows and rows of them, neat and soulless, mocking him with their precision. He rubbed his temple and muttered under his breath. Quarterly reports. The gift that keeps on giving. The office around him hummed with the low buzz of fluorescent lights and the occasional clack of keyboards. A few co-workers chatted near the coffee machine, their laughter drifting across the beige expanse of cubicles. Adam glanced up, offered a polite smile when one of them waved, then returned to his screen. He liked these people well enough, but the idea of joining them for after-work drinks made his stomach knot. Work was work. Life was life. Mixing the two, that was a recipe for trouble. "Hey, Adam," called Greg from 2 desks over, leaning back in his chair like a man who had conquered the world, or at least his inbox. "We're hitting O'Malley's tonight. You in?" Adam didn't even look up. "Can't. Got plans." Greg grinned. "Plans or excuses?" "Plans," Adam said, tapping a cell in the spreadsheet like it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. "Important ones." Greg chuckled and turned back to his monitor. Adam exhaled slowly. It wasn't that he disliked people. He just preferred his own company. Or maybe he preferred not risking the fragile balance he'd built since last year, the balance that kept him from unraveling. He saved the file, closed the program, and leaned back in his chair. His reflection in the darkened monitor stared back. 34 years old, decent shape, brown hair that behaved most days, and eyes that looked tired even when he wasn't. Friendly enough face, but not the kind that turned heads. He didn't mind. He wasn't looking for attention. Not anymore. The drive home was quiet, just the hum of tires on asphalt and the soft strains of a jazz playlist he'd grown attached to during late-night overtime shifts. His ranch-style house sat at the end of a sleepy street, modest but solid. A starter home, though it hadn't started the life he'd imagined. He parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, staring at the porch light casting a warm glow on the front door. A year ago, he'd pictured walking through that door with a fiancée on his arm, maybe carrying her over the threshold like some cheesy rom-com hero. Instead, he'd walked in alone, carrying boxes and a heart that felt like shattered glass. Adam killed the engine and stepped out, the cool November air biting at his cheeks. He unlocked the door, dropped his keys in the bowl by the entryway, and kicked off his shoes. The house smelled faintly of rosemary and garlic, last night's experiment in comfort food. Cooking was his therapy. Numbers paid the bills, but herbs healed the soul. He wandered into the kitchen, flicked on the light, and smiled at the neat rows of potted basil, thyme, and oregano lining the windowsill. His greenhouse out back was his pride and joy, but these little pots were his daily reminder that life could still grow, even after being uprooted. "Basil never cheats on you," he murmured, snipping a sprig and inhaling its peppery scent. The joke tasted bittersweet. It had been May when everything fell apart. He could still feel the sting like it happened yesterday. The endless overtime, the late-night side gigs, the exhaustion that clung to his bones. All for a plan he thought was perfect. Buy the ring, buy the house, propose to the woman he'd loved for 3 years. He hadn't lied to her. Not once. He told her when he had to work late. He just didn't tell her why. And then came the post. Her smiling face on social media, arm draped around some guy at a club, caption screaming betrayal. "When your boyfriend cheats, you upgrade." The comments were brutal. Friends he'd known for years turned on him like wolves. He'd stared at the screen, fury boiling, then cold clarity settling in. His response had been short, sharp, and surgical. Photos of receipts, the ring locked in its velvet box, the deed to the house. His caption: "I worked extra hours for over half a year so I could buy a ring and a house before I proposed to my girlfriend of 3 years. Instead of asking me, she and her friends decided I'm a cheater, and to get back at me, she ran out and hooked up with a guy she probably doesn't even remember his name. For all of you calling me a cheater based on the lies of a cheater, save your breath. For those who've supported me, I know who you are and I'll remember." The post went viral in their circle. She showed up at his door 2 days later, excuses spilling like cheap wine. He'd let her talk. Morbid curiosity, maybe? But when she tried to blame her friends, he'd laughed. A hollow sound. "Find better friends," he'd said, holding the door open. "But I have no use for a cheater in my life." And that was that. Adam shook off the memory and turned to his second life, the one that didn't hurt. He powered up his laptop and opened his video editing software. On the screen, a half-finished clip of his latest food blog episode waited. A cozy diner with mismatched chairs and the best blueberry pie he'd ever tasted. His channel, The Boring Food Guy, had started as a joke in college. Now it had a modest following and a surprising influence. Owners messaged him, thanking him for boosting their business. He never took himself too seriously. Life was too short for ego. He trimmed a segment, added a caption, and chuckled at his own voiceover. If heaven had a waiting room, it would smell like this pie. When the upload bar crawled across the screen, Adam leaned back and sipped a glass of Merlot. Fruity, just the way he liked. Tomorrow he'd scout a new spot. A cafe someone had recommended in a comment thread. Supposedly, it had a marinara sauce that could fix any heartbreak. "Guess we'll see about that," he said to the empty kitchen, smiling faintly. Later, as he locked up for the night, Adam paused by the greenhouse door. Inside, rows of herbs thrived under soft grow lights: basil, thyme, rosemary, mint. He touched the glass, feeling the warmth radiate through. "Life's messy," he murmured. "But at least dinner doesn't have to be." He turned off the porch light and headed to bed, unaware that tomorrow's cafe visit would change everything. Chapter 2. Comfort food and complications. The cafe smelled like heaven. Garlic sizzling in olive oil, tomatoes simmering low and slow, and the faint sweetness of fresh basil drifting through the air. Adam paused at the door, taking it all in. The place was small, tucked between a laundromat and a thrift store, but it had charm. Mismatched chairs, chalkboard menus, and sunlight spilling across worn wooden tables like a warm invitation. A soft hum of conversation floated through the room, punctuated by the clink of silverware and the hiss of the espresso machine. He adjusted his camera bag on his shoulder and stepped inside. A bell jingled overhead, and a woman behind the counter looked up. She was wiping her hands on a flour-dusted apron, her dark hair pulled into a practical bun. Her eyes, sharp, assessing, met his, and for a second, Adam felt like he'd walked into an exam he hadn't studied for. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice calm but curious. Adam smiled, easy and disarming. "I hope so. I'm Adam Noles. I run a little food blog, The Boring Food Guy." Her brows lifted. "That's an interesting name," he chuckled. "It's accurate. I'm boring. The food isn't." That earned him a small smile, and Adam felt the tension ease. "I was hoping to feature your cafe," he continued. "I heard you make a marinara sauce that could heal a broken heart." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "That's a bold claim. Who told you that?" "An old friend," Adam said, setting his bag down. "And honestly, I could use some soul-healing carbs." Her smile widened, and Adam noticed the faint pink in her cheeks. "I'm Susan," she said, offering her hand. "Owner, chef, and occasional therapist, though I charge extra for that." Adam took her hand, warm and firm. "Good to know. I'll stick to the food for now." They settled at a corner table, Adam setting up his small camera while Susan brought out a plate of garlic bread that smelled like temptation itself. The crust was golden, glistening with butter, and sprinkled with flecks of parsley. Adam's stomach growled audibly, earning a laugh from Susan. "Guess I should have eaten before coming," he said, grinning. "Guess you should have," she teased, sliding the plate closer. "Eat. It'll make you less scary." Adam popped a piece into his mouth and groaned dramatically. This is art." Susan rolled her eyes, but her lips curved in amusement. "You're laying it on thick. Thicker than this butter," he said, and she laughed again, a sound that made something warm unfurl in his chest. He hit record, and the conversation flowed like wine. "So," Adam began, "what inspired you to open this place?" Susan leaned back, thoughtful. "Honestly, I wanted something that was mine. After my engagement fell apart, I realized I'd spent years planning a life around someone else's dreams. This cafe, it's my dream." Adam nodded, impressed. "That takes guts." She shrugged, but her eyes softened. "It takes stubbornness." He grinned. "Stubbornness makes the best marinara." She laughed, and Adam felt a spark, small, but undeniable. After the interview, Susan insisted he try the house specialty, chicken parmigiana. When the plate arrived, Adam stared like he'd been handed a treasure chest. The chicken was golden, smothered in bubbling mozzarella, with a halo of rich marinara sauce and a sprinkle of fresh basil. He took one bite and closed his eyes in exaggerated bliss. "This," he declared, "is not food. This is therapy." Susan laughed, cheeks pink again. "You're ridiculous. Ridiculously honest," he countered. "Seriously, this deserves a fan club." She rolled her eyes, but he saw the flicker of pride. "You really like it?" "I'd marry this chicken if it were legal," Adam said, deadpan. Susan snorted, covering her mouth. "You're dangerous. Dangerous and hungry," he said, grinning. "Which reminds me, how do you get basil this fresh? Most places use dried stuff." Her eyes lit up. "You can tell the difference?" "Of course," Adam said. "I grow my own herbs. Cooking's my guilty pleasure." Susan tilted her head, intrigued. "You? Mr. Numbers and Spreadsheets." Adam chuckled. "Even accountants need hobbies." She hesitated, then smiled. "You'll have to show me sometime." Adam's heart did a little flip. "How about this weekend? I'll cook for you. You can judge my basil." Susan laughed, shaking her head. "You're confident." "Confident-ish," he said. "Come on. You're always in the kitchen. Let someone else do the work for once." She considered, then nodded slowly. "Okay, Saturday." Adam grinned, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time: anticipation. "It's a date." Susan raised a brow. "A lunch. A lunch date," he corrected, and her laugh followed him all the way out the door. Outside, the late afternoon sun painted the street in gold. Adam walked toward his car, camera bag slung over his shoulder, replaying the conversation in his head. Her laugh, her eyes, the way she said okay like she was letting herself take a risk. He slid into the driver's seat and sat there for a moment, staring at the steering wheel. "What are you doing, Adam?" He wasn't sure. All he knew was that for the first time in months, maybe years, he was looking forward to something that wasn't work or a quiet dinner alone. He started the engine, a smile tugging at his lips. Saturday couldn't come soon enough. Chapter 3. Lunch, laughter, and lingering looks. Saturday morning arrived crisp and bright, sunlight spilling across Adam's kitchen like a promise. He stood at the counter, sleeves rolled up, arranging fresh herbs in neat little bundles. Basil, thyme, oregano, his holy trinity. The greenhouse had been generous this week, and he intended to impress. He glanced at the clock. 10 minutes until Susan arrived. His stomach fluttered. Not nerves exactly, but something close. Anticipation, maybe. It had been a long time since he'd looked forward to someone's company like this. The doorbell rang. Adam wiped his hands on a towel and headed for the door, forcing himself not to sprint. When he opened it, Susan stood there in jeans and a soft gray sweater, hair loose around her shoulders. Casual but somehow radiant. "Wow," Adam said before he could stop himself. "You clean up nice." Susan arched a brow. "You say that like I was dirty before." Adam grinned. "Flour counts as dirt in some circles." She laughed, stepping inside. "So, this is the famous bachelor pad?" "Bachelor pad makes it sound like I have neon beer signs and a pool table," Adam said, closing the door. "I promise it's just a house, with an excessive number of basil plants." Susan glanced around, taking in the warm tones, the tidy kitchen, the faint scent of garlic already in the air. "Not bad," she said. "Cozy." "I aim for cozy," Adam said, leading her to the kitchen. "And edible." The counter was a battlefield of ingredients. Fresh pasta dough, ripe tomatoes, a bottle of Merlot breathing like a sleeping cat. Susan whistled low. "You weren't kidding about competitive pasta." Adam shrugged, feigning modesty. "I take my carbs seriously." She slipped off her sweater, draping it over a chair, and rolled up her sleeves. "Where do you want me?" Adam blinked, then recovered. Chopping station. You're on tomato duty." Susan washed her hands and grabbed a knife, moving with the confidence of someone who'd spent years in a kitchen. Adam watched for a beat too long before turning back to the dough, cheeks warming. They fell into an easy rhythm, kneading, chopping, stirring, punctuated by laughter and the occasional playful jab. "You're surprisingly good at this," Susan said, slicing tomatoes with surgical precision. Adam smirked. "Surprisingly? I'll have you know I'm a professional amateur." "Professional amateur," she repeated, amused. "That's not a thing." "It is now," Adam said, dusting flour off his hands. "I'm a trendsetter." Susan shook her head, smiling. "You're ridiculous." "True," Adam said cheerfully, "but harmless." The kitchen filled with the rich aroma of simmering marinara, garlic mingling with basil in a fragrant symphony. Adam poured 2 glasses of Merlot and handed one to Susan. "To competitive pasta," he said, raising his glass. "To not burning the house down," Susan replied, clinking hers against his. They sipped, and for a moment the banter faded. Susan's eyes softened as she looked around the kitchen, then back at Adam. "You really love this, don't you?" Adam shrugged, swirling his wine. "Cooking? Yeah. Grounding. Numbers pay the bills, but this," he gestured to the herbs, the sauce, the dough. "This feels like life." Susan nodded slowly. "I get that." As they plated the pasta, their fingers brushed, just a whisper of contact, but enough to send a spark racing up Adam's arm. He glanced at Susan, and for a heartbeat, neither moved. Then she smiled, small and warm, and the moment passed like steam over boiling water. They carried the plates to the table and sat, laughter returning as they tasted their creation. "Okay," Susan said after the first bite, eyes widening. "This is annoyingly good." Adam grinned. "Annoyingly? Yes," she said, pointing her fork at him. "Because now I have to admit you're not just a food blogger. You're a threat." "A threat?" Adam echoed, amused. "To my ego," Susan said, taking another bite. "If you keep this up, I'll have to hire you." Adam chuckled. "Tempting offer, but I'm pretty attached to my spreadsheets." Susan made a face. "Spreadsheets sound like punishment." "They pay for the basil," Adam said, "and the wine." After lunch, they lingered over coffee, conversation drifting from recipes to childhood stories to the quirks of small-town life. Susan laughed easily, her eyes crinkling at the corners, and Adam found himself memorizing the sound. At one point, she glanced around the kitchen again. "You know," she said softly, "this doesn't feel like a bachelor pad." Adam raised a brow. "No neon signs." "No," she said, smiling faintly. "It feels like someone built it for a future." Adam's chest tightened. He looked at her, really looked, and for a moment the weight of last year pressed against his ribs. He wanted to tell her everything. The ring, the house, the heartbreak. But instead, he said lightly, "Maybe I just like cozy." Susan studied him for a beat, then nodded. "Cozy suits you." When she finally stood to leave, Adam walked her to the door. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, painting her hair in gold. She slipped on her sweater, turned to him with a smile that felt like sunlight. "Thanks for lunch," she said. "It was nice." "Nice," Adam teased. "I was aiming for life-changing." Susan laughed, opening the door. "Don't push your luck, sacred herb guy." Adam grinned. "Saturday's officially my favorite day now." She paused, meeting his eyes for a long, quiet second. Then she smiled soft, almost shy, and stepped outside. Adam watched her car disappear down the street, his heart thudding like a drum. For the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't dared hope for. Hope. Chapter 4. Sparks in the sauce. Adam's phone buzzed just as he finished editing the last clip from Susan's cafe. He glanced at the screen and smiled. "Susan, you've officially made me internet famous. I owe you coffee." Adam chuckled, thumbs flying. "Adam, only if it comes with extra basil." Her reply came fast. "Susan, deal. But you're paying if you order dessert." Adam grinned, leaning back in his chair. Dessert was a small price for the kind of smile her texts put on his face. The cafe was busier than last time, a low hum of chatter filling the air when Adam walked in. Susan spotted him immediately, waving from behind the counter. She wore her usual apron, hair pulled into that practical bun. But there was something different today. A spark in her eyes, maybe. Or maybe Adam was imagining things. "You again," she said as he approached. "Didn't get enough last time?" "Your marinara might be addictive," Adam said, sliding onto a stool at the counter. "I'm considering rehab." Susan laughed, grabbing a menu. "What'll it be?" "Surprise me," Adam said. "But if it involves chicken parm, I won't complain." Her lips curved. "The heartbreak special. Coming right up." While Susan worked, Adam set his phone on the counter, scrolling through the flood of comments on his latest video. "That sauce looks divine. Where is this place? I need that recipe now." He grinned. Susan's cafe was trending in his little corner of the internet, and he couldn't help feeling proud. "You're ruining my reputation," Susan said, sliding a steaming plate in front of him. "People think I bribed you for that review." Adam forked a piece of chicken, savoring the aroma. "Bribery would have worked. I'm cheap. Just offer me dessert." Susan shook her head, laughing. "You're impossible." "True," Adam said, taking a bite and groaning softly. "Okay, this is ridiculous. You could heal nations with this." "Don't start," Susan warned, but her cheeks flushed pink. As Adam ate, his gaze drifted to the bulletin board near the door. A colorful flyer caught his eye. Local culinary showdown team competition. He scanned the details, teams of 2 live audience prizes. His pulse kicked up. Susan noticed his stare. "What's got your attention?" Adam turned, grinning. "That." He pointed at the flyer. "You and me. Culinary dream team." Susan blinked. "Are you trying to sabotage me?" "No," Adam said, leaning in. "I'm trying to make sure the world knows your chicken parm deserves a fan club." She laughed, shaking her head. "You're serious?" "Deadly," Adam said. "Come on. It'll be fun. Chaos, cameras, competitive cooking. What's not to love?" Susan hesitated, biting her lip. Adam held her gaze, letting the silence stretch just enough to feel charged. Finally, she sighed. "You're lucky you're charming." Adam grinned. "I'll take that as a yes." When he left the cafe, the autumn air felt sharper, brighter. He walked to his car with a grin that wouldn't quit. A cooking competition with Susan? He had no idea what he was getting into, but for the first time in years he was excited to find out. Chapter 5. Whisks and worries. The cafe was quiet after hours, chairs stacked on tables, the scent of marinara lingering like a memory. Adam stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, surveying the battlefield of stainless steel counters and hanging pots. He felt oddly exhilarated, like a kid sneaking into a candy store. Susan walked in carrying a box of fresh produce, her hair pulled back, eyes bright. "You look way too excited for someone about to risk public humiliation." Adam grinned. "Humiliation builds character. Or ruins reputations," Susan said, setting the box down. "You sure about this?" "Absolutely," Adam said, grabbing a whisk like a knight claiming his sword. "We're going to crush this competition." Susan smirked. "Confidence looks good on you. Reckless, but good." Adam twirled the whisk dramatically. "Reckless is just confidence without a safety net." Susan laughed, shaking her head. "You're ridiculous." "True," Adam said cheerfully, "but harmless." They started with the basics: pasta dough, sauce prep, plating ideas. The kitchen filled with the rhythmic sounds of chopping, stirring, and sizzling. Adam loved the energy. The way Susan moved with precision and grace, like the kitchen was an extension of her body. He, on the other hand, was less graceful. When he tried to flip a crepe, it launched skyward like a rogue frisbee, landing with a splat on the floor. Susan doubled over laughing, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Oh my God," she gasped. "You're a menace." Adam bowed. "Thank you. I aim to entertain." As the laughter faded, a quiet settled between them, comfortable but charged. They worked side by side, shoulders brushing occasionally, each touch sending a spark Adam tried to ignore, tried and failed. You're good at this, Susan said softly, tasting the sauce. Cooking, I mean. Adam shrugged, focusing on the herbs. It's grounding. Numbers pay the bills. But this, he gestured to the simmering pot. This feels like life. Susan nodded, her expression thoughtful. I get that. Later, as they plated their practice dish, their fingers touched. Just a whisper of contact, but enough to make Adam's pulse stumble. He glanced at Susan, and for a moment, neither moved. Then she smiled, small and warm, and the moment passed like steam over boiling water. They tasted the dish together, leaning close over the counter. Susan closed her eyes, savoring the bite. Okay, she said finally. We might actually have a shot. Adam grinned. Second place at least. Susan raised a brow. Second. First is overrated, Adam said. Second's where the real glory is. Susan laughed, shaking her head. You're impossible. True, Adam said, smiling, but harmless. When they finished cleaning up, Susan walked him to the door. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain. Their goodbye lingered, too long for friends, not quite enough for lovers. Adam wanted to say something, anything, but the words tangled in his throat. See you at the showdown, Susan said, her voice soft. Wouldn't miss it, Adam replied. As he walked to his car, he felt the weight of something new pressing against his ribs. Not fear, not regret. Something far more dangerous. Hope. Chapter 6. The heat is on. The venue buzzed like a beehive, bright lights, clanging pots, and the hum of 100 conversations. Adam stood at the edge of the stage, clutching a whisk like a lifeline. He'd faced deadlines, audits, and the wrath of senior accountants. But this was chaos with an audience. Susan appeared at his side, calm as a summer breeze, her apron crisp and her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She glanced at him, amused. You look like you're about to fight a dragon. Adam grinned nervously. If the dragon breathes marinara, I'm doomed. Susan laughed, the sound grounding him in the storm of noise. Relax, it's just cooking. Cooking? Adam muttered, eyeing the cameras swiveling toward them. With a live audience and judges who look like they eat fear for breakfast. The announcer's voice boomed over the speakers. Welcome to the local culinary showdown. Today, our teams will battle for glory, bragging rights, and a very shiny trophy. Adam leaned toward Susan. I want that trophy. Susan smirked. You're ridiculous. True, Adam said, adjusting his apron. But harmless. The clock started, and chaos erupted. Adam and Susan dove into their station, chopping, stirring, and plating like their lives depended on it. The kitchen smelled like heaven, garlic, basil, sizzling butter, but the pressure was relentless. Whisk faster, Susan barked, sliding a pan toward him. Adam whisked like a man possessed. If my arm falls off, you're signing the insurance claim. Susan snorted, tossing herbs into the sauce. You're fine. Then disaster struck. Adam reached for a jar of cream, misjudged the angle and sent it flying. It hit the counter, exploded like a dairy grenade, and splattered across his apron, and the sleeve of a passing judge. Oh no, Adam muttered, grabbing a towel. I'm so sorry. The judge glared, dabbing at the mess. Susan bit her lip, trying not to laugh. You're lucky you're charming, she whispered. Adam shot her a look. Charming doesn't clean cream stains. Despite the mishaps, they worked like a team, laughing, improvising, and cheering each other on. When the timer hit 0, their dish gleamed on the plate. Chicken parmigiana with fresh pasta and a marinara sauce that smelled like redemption. The judges tasted, murmured, and scribbled notes. Adam held his breath. Susan stood tall, calm but tense. And second place, the announcer declared, goes to Team Warner Noles. The crowd erupted in applause. Adam blinked, then grinned like a fool. Second place. I told you. Susan laughed, relief flooding her face. You're insufferable. True, Adam said, hugging her impulsively. She stiffened for a heartbeat, then melted into the embrace. For a moment, the noise faded, and it was just them, warm, close, and something unspoken humming between them. Then came the twist. Second place winners, the announcer continued, will receive a contract for a weekly cooking show filmed at their restaurant. Adam froze. Wait, what? Susan's jaw dropped. You're kidding. Nope. The announcer beamed. Lights, cameras, and real-life cooking chaos. Coming soon. Adam turned to Susan, grinning. Guess we're going to be famous. Susan stared at him, laughter bubbling up like champagne. You're insane. True, Adam said softly, his smile lingering, but harmless. As the crowd cheered and cameras flashed, Adam caught Susan's gaze. Something passed between them, electric, undeniable. Promise, maybe, or a question neither was ready to voice. But Adam knew one thing for sure. Life was about to get messy, and he couldn't wait. Chapter 7. Lights, camera, awkward. Adam had faced plenty of pressure in his life. Tight deadlines, angry clients, even the occasional tax audit. But nothing prepared him for the blinding glare of studio lights in Susan's cozy cafe. The place looked transformed. Cameras perched like vultures, cables snaking across the floor, and a director barking orders like a drill sergeant. Adam adjusted his apron for the 5th time, tugging at the strings like they were choking him. "Do I need to sign autographs before we start?" he muttered. Susan smirked, sliding a tray of fresh herbs onto the counter. "Only if you sign the health inspection report too." Adam grinned, but his stomach was doing somersaults. He'd agreed to this because it sounded fun, chaotic, sure, but fun. Now, staring at the cameras, he wondered if he'd lost his mind. The director clapped his hands. "Places, everyone. We're rolling in 3-2. Adam plastered on a smile, heart thudding like a drum. "Welcome to, Susan's House of Basil." The words tumbled out before he could stop them. Susan froze, then burst out laughing, doubling over the counter. The director groaned. "Cut. Again." Adam rubbed the back of his neck, cheeks burning. "Sorry. Nerves." Susan wiped her eyes, still chuckling. "House of Basil? That's creative." "Exclusive club," Adam said, deadpan. "Membership requires chanting over oregano." Susan laughed harder, and for a moment, Adam forgot the cameras. Her laughter was like sunlight, warm, unfiltered, and entirely worth the embarrassment. Take 2 went better, until Adam knocked over a jar of marinara mid-demo. The sauce splattered across his apron and dripped onto the pristine counter like a crime scene. "Oh no," Adam groaned, grabbing a towel. "We have a casualty." Susan handed him another towel, eyes dancing. "You're a natural at making messes." "Talent," Adam said solemnly. "Pure talent." The crew snickered, and the director muttered something about authentic television. Adam decided to take that as a compliment. Between takes, Adam stole glances at Susan as she explained recipes to the camera. Her voice steady, her smile effortless. She belonged here, confident, passionate, alive. Watching her, Adam felt something shift inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. "She's not just good at this," he thought. "She loves it, and I love watching her love it." After the final wrap, the cafe returned to its usual quiet hum. The crew packed up, leaving behind the faint smell of lights and adrenaline. Susan leaned against the counter, exhaling. "Well," she said, "that was something." "Something?" Adam echoed, tossing his sauce-stained apron into the laundry bin. "Pretty sure I invented a new genre, culinary slapstick." Susan laughed softly, her eyes warm. "You made it easier." Adam blinked. "Me?" She nodded. "I was nervous, but you kept it light." Adam smiled, a slow, genuine curve. "Anytime. It's my specialty." They lingered as the last crew member left, silence stretching like a thread between them, thin, fragile, humming with something unspoken. Adam wanted to say more, but the words tangled in his throat. So he just smiled, and Susan smiled back, and for a moment, that was enough. Chapter 8. Stirring the pot. The cafe smelled like heaven, fresh bread cooling on racks, marinara simmering low on the stove, but Susan barely noticed. Her phone buzzed on the counter, and when she glanced at the screen, her stomach nodded. "Mark, saw your show. Looks great. Coffee sometime?" Susan stared at the message, pulse ticking in her throat. Mark, the man who'd once promised forever and delivered betrayal instead. She deleted the text, but the unease lingered like a bitter aftertaste. Adam walked in just then, carrying a basket of herbs from his greenhouse. "Delivery for the queen," he announced, setting it on the counter. "Fresh basil, thyme, and a little rosemary for good luck." Susan forced a smile. "You're spoiling me." "Part of my charm," Adam said, grinning. Then his smile faded as he studied her face. "You okay? You look like someone burned the sauce." Susan hesitated, then sighed. "My ex reached out." Adam's jaw tightened, though he masked it with humor. "Tell him you're busy, saving the world one chicken parm at a time." Susan laughed softly, appreciating the levity. "You make everything sound easy." Adam shrugged, arranging the herbs. "Doesn't mean it is. Just means you don't have to do it alone." They moved into prep for the next episode, chopping and stirring in companionable silence. But Adam's mind wasn't quiet. The thought of Susan's ex, Mark, hovered like a storm cloud. He hated how it made him feel. Protective, yes, but also something sharper, something that tasted suspiciously like jealousy. Why does the idea of her with him make me want to throw oregano at a wall? He wondered, slicing basil with unnecessary force. Susan noticed, tilting her head. "You're murdering that basil." Adam blinked, then laughed. "Sorry, basil deserved better." Later, as the cameras rolled, Adam slipped easily into his on-screen persona. Witty, relaxed, the guy who could make a sauce spill look like comedy gold. But inside, his thoughts churned like boiling water. He told himself he wasn't ready for anything serious, that trust was a fragile thing. And yet, every time Susan smiled at him, something inside him shifted. When filming wrapped, Susan texted him later that night. "Susan, thanks for today. You make things easier." Adam stared at the message, smiling like an idiot. He typed back, "Adam, that's because I'm secretly a superhero. Basil man." Her reply came fast, Susan, do you wear a cape? Adam, only when chopping parsley. Adam laughed aloud, the tension easing. But as he set his phone down, one truth settled in his chest like a stone. He was falling for her, and it scared him more than he cared to admit. Chapter 9. A recipe for confession. The cafe was buzzing with energy, cameras rolling for another episode of Comfort Kitchen Live. Adam stood at the prep station, sleeves rolled up, trying to look calm while his heart thudded like a drum solo. Today's dish was simple pasta with a twist, but nothing about this day felt simple. Susan moved beside him, graceful as ever, her laughter floating above the clatter of pots. You're whisking like you're trying to break a world record, she teased. Adam grinned, though his grip on the whisk was white-knuckled. Just trying to impress the judges. Susan smirked. Pretty sure they're already impressed. You've managed not to set off the smoke alarm this time. Progress, Adam said solemnly. Next goal. Don't fling sauce at anyone. The cameras zoomed in as they plated the pasta, steam curling like ribbons. Adam cracked a joke about culinary suspense, earning a ripple of laughter from the crew. But inside, his thoughts were anything but light. He'd been carrying this weight for weeks now. The quiet realization that Susan wasn't just someone he liked spending time with. She was someone he wanted in his life, in all the messy, imperfect ways that mattered. And every time she smiled at him, every time her hand brushed his, the truth pressed harder against his ribs. When filming wrapped, the crew packed up, leaving the cafe bathed in the soft glow of late afternoon. Susan poured 2 glasses of wine and slid one toward Adam. To surviving another episode, she said, raising hers. Adam clinked his glass against hers. To not burning down the cafe. They laughed, sipping in companionable silence. Then Susan tilted her head, studying him. You're quiet. Adam set his glass down, fingers tracing the rim. His pulse hammered, but he forced the words out before fear could choke them. You know, he said lightly, I didn't sign up for this to fall for the chef. Susan froze, her glass halfway to her lips. Her eyes widened, then softened, a slow smile curving her mouth. Good thing I didn't sign up to fall for the food guy. Adam blinked, then laughed, a shaky, disbelieving sound. So, we're both terrible at sticking to the plan? Seems that way, Susan said, her voice warm, steady. The air between them shifted, charged, humming with something that felt like possibility. Adam wanted to reach for her, to close the space, but he held back. Not out of doubt, but out of respect. This wasn't a moment to rush. It was a moment to savor, like the first bite of a perfect dish. Susan smiled again, softer this time. You know, she said, trust is binary. You either do or you don't. Adam met her gaze, his voice low. Then I'm all in. They didn't kiss, not yet. But when Susan walked him to the door, their hands brushed, lingered, and held for a heartbeat longer than necessary. And for Adam, that was enough. For now. Chapter 10. When the past knocks, the cafe was quiet, sunlight slanting through the windows, painting golden stripes across the worn wooden floor. Susan was prepping for the next shoot, her hands moving automatically, chopping, stirring, but her mind was elsewhere. She'd almost convinced herself the text from Mark was a fluke, a desperate reach from a man who belonged firmly in her past. Then the door opened, and there he was. Mark stood framed in the doorway, all polished charm and easy confidence, like nothing had happened. Susan, he said, his voice smooth as butter. You look amazing. Susan froze, knife poised above a cutting board. Her pulse kicked hard against her ribs. Mark, she said flatly, what are you doing here? Just wanted to see you, he said, stepping inside like he owned the place. Saw your show. You're incredible. Susan's throat tightened. She opened her mouth to respond, but the bell above the door jingled again, and Adam walked in carrying a basket of fresh herbs. Delivery for the queen, he announced, then stopped dead when he saw Mark. His smile faltered, replaced by something sharper. And who's this? Mark turned, sizing Adam up with a practiced glance. I'm an old friend, he said smoothly. Susan and I go way back. Adam set the basket down with deliberate care. Funny, he said lightly. She never mentioned you. Susan shot Adam a look, half warning, half gratitude. Mark was just leaving, she said firmly. Mark's smile wavered. Come on, Susan. Can't we talk? Just 5 minutes. No, Susan said, her voice steady now. You don't get 5 minutes. You had years, and you blew it. Mark flinched, but recovered quickly, his gaze flicking to Adam. So this is the new guy? Adam's jaw tightened, but his tone stayed calm, almost casual. Funny thing about new guys, he said. They don't come with old baggage. Susan bit back a laugh, tension easing just a fraction. Mark, she said, gesturing to the door. Goodbye. For a moment, Mark looked like he might argue. Then he shrugged, masking defeat with arrogance. Your loss, he said, and walked out. The door clicked shut, and silence settled like dust. Susan exhaled, shoulders sagging. Well, she said, that was unpleasant. Adam moved closer, his voice gentle now. You okay? Susan nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. Yeah, just surprised. Adam hesitated, then reached out, covering her hand with his. Warm, steady, grounding. You don't owe him anything, he said quietly. Not even a second thought. Susan looked up, meeting his gaze. For a moment, the world narrowed to that single point of connection. The weight of his hand, the sincerity in his eyes. Something inside her shifted, something that felt dangerously like trust. Thank you, she whispered. Adam smiled, slow and sure. Anytime. They stood like that for a beat too long, the air humming with something unspoken. Then Susan pulled back gently, clearing her throat. We should get ready for filming, right? Adam said, though his pulse was still racing. He turned to the basket of herbs, pretending to fuss with the basil. But inside, one truth rang clear and undeniable. He wasn't just the food guy anymore. He wanted to be the guy she trusted, the guy who stayed. Chapter 11. A recipe for confession. The cafe smelled like heaven, garlic sizzling in olive oil, fresh basil perfuming the air, and the faint sweetness of tomatoes simmering in the back kitchen. Adam stirred the pot slowly, watching the sauce bubble like it was plotting against him. He wasn't nervous about the food. He was nervous about the words he'd been rehearsing in his head for weeks. Just say it, he told himself. You've faced worse than this. You survived spreadsheets. Susan's laughter floated from the dining area, light and melodic, as she teased a regular about stealing extra breadsticks. That sound, God, that sound, made his chest tighten. He'd heard it 100 times since they started filming the cooking show, but tonight it felt different. Tonight, he wanted it to be his forever soundtrack. He wiped his hands on a towel, took a deep breath, and walked out carrying the steaming dish like a peace offering. The cafe was cozy, glowing under warm pendant lights. Regulars chatted over wine, and the hum of conversation wrapped around him like a familiar song. Susan looked up as he approached, her eyes catching his, and for a moment, the bustling room faded into background noise. Smells amazing, she said, smiling. You've officially mastered my recipe. Adam grinned, though his pulse was hammering. Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation to maintain as an amateur. She laughed, cheeks pink, and he loved how her eyes crinkled when she did. He set the dish down, then slid into the chair across from her. For a second, he just watched her. How she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, how her fingers lingered on the edge of the plate like she was grounding herself. You okay? She asked softly, tilting her head. You look serious. Adam swallowed hard. Here goes nothing. I've been thinking, he began, voice steady despite the storm inside him. About us. Her smile faltered, replaced by something cautious. Us. Yeah. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, searching her eyes for any sign of retreat. When I walked into this cafe months ago, I thought I was just here for good food. Turns out, I found something better. Susan's breath hitched, barely audible over the clatter of dishes in the background. Adam. He held up a hand, gentle but firm. Let me finish. I spent a long time believing love was about grand gestures. Rings, houses, big surprises. But then I met you, and you made me realize it's about the little things. Like laughing over spilled flour. Or arguing about oregano. Or just sitting here, feeling like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Her eyes shimmered, and for a terrifying second, he thought she might cry. Instead, she laughed, a shaky, beautiful sound. You really know how to make a girl speechless. Adam smiled, relief washing over him like warm sunlight. That's the goal. Silence stretched between them, not awkward but charged, like the pause before a perfect note in a song. Finally, Susan reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. You know what I think? What? His voice was barely a whisper. I think you're dangerous, she said, eyes sparkling. Because you make me want to trust again. Adam's heart thudded so hard he was sure she could hear it. He turned his hand, lacing his fingers with hers. Then let me earn it. One day at a time. Her smile was slow, deliberate, and it felt like sunrise. Deal. The cafe around them buzzed on, oblivious to the quiet revolution happening at table 7. For Adam, the world had narrowed to the warmth of her hand and the promise in her eyes. And for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about numbers or plans or what could go wrong. He was thinking about what could go right. Chapter 12. Love on camera. Adam adjusted the collar of his shirt for the 5th time, glaring at his reflection in the cafe's front window. It wasn't nerves about the cameras. They'd been filming the cooking show for weeks now, and he'd learned to ignore the blinking red lights. No, tonight was different. Tonight, the cameras were rolling for the season finale, and Adam had a plan that had nothing to do with marinara sauce. Inside, the cafe buzzed with energy. Regulars filled the tables, chatting excitedly about the live taping. Susan moved through the crowd like sunlight, warm, bright, impossible to ignore. She wore her favorite apron, the one with the tiny embroidered basil leaves, and Adam felt his chest tighten. He'd fallen for her somewhere between the spilled flour and the second-place trophy, and now he was about to tell her in front of, well, everyone. The producer waved at him. 2 minutes, Adam. You ready? He nodded, though his heart was pounding like a drum solo. Ready? Not even close. But here we go. The show began with their usual banter. Susan teasing him about his knife skills, Adam pretending to be offended. The audience laughed, the cameras zoomed in, and for a moment it felt like any other episode. But Adam's mind was on the small velvet box tucked in his apron pocket. They plated the final dish, a perfect chicken parmigiana, golden and bubbling, and the crowd erupted in applause. Susan grinned at him, cheeks flushed with pride. "We did it," she whispered, and Adam thought, "No, we're just getting started." He cleared his throat, stepping closer so only she could hear. "Susan, before we wrap up, there's something I need to say." Her brows knitted in curiosity. "Adam, you're scaring me." He smiled, nervous but steady. "Don't be scared. Just listen." Turning to the audience, Adam raised his voice. "Folks, you've watched us cook together for weeks now. You've seen the disasters, the victories, and the occasional flying whisk. But what you haven't seen is what happened behind the scenes. How this incredible woman reminded me that life isn't about perfect recipes. It's about finding someone who makes the mess worth it." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Susan froze, eyes wide, as Adam pulled the velvet box from his apron and dropped to one knee. "Susan Warner," he said, voice thick with emotion. "You've trusted me with your kitchen, your laughter, and your time. I'd like to spend the rest of my life earning that trust. Will you marry me?" For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then Susan laughed, a bright, tearful sound, and covered her mouth with trembling hands. "Adam, you're insane," she whispered, eyes shining. "But yes, yes." The cafe exploded in cheers. The producer nearly dropped the camera. Adam slipped the ring onto her finger, and Susan pulled him up into a hug that felt like home. Later, as the crowd toasted with wine and the cameras captured their kiss, Adam thought about the long road that had led here. The heartbreak, the quiet nights alone, the basil plants that never betrayed him. And now Susan, his partner in chaos, his recipe for happiness. Life was messy. Love was messy. But standing there with her hand in his, Adam realized something simple and perfect. He wouldn't have it any other way. Epilogue. Basil and beyond. The sun spilled golden light across the cafe's herb garden, where basil leaves swayed like tiny green flags in the breeze. Adam crouched near the planter, inspecting the soil with the same intensity he once reserved for quarterly reports. Behind him, Susan leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching him with a smile that could melt butter. "You know," she teased, "most husbands bring flowers. You bring fertilizer." Adam glanced over his shoulder, grinning. "Flowers die. Basil lives. And basil makes pesto. Which, by the way, is romantic." Susan laughed, stepping down to join him. She wore jeans and one of his old t-shirts, sleeves rolled up, hair in a messy bun. He thought she looked better than any magazine cover. "Romantic pesto? That's a new one." "Hey," he said, standing and brushing dirt from his hands. "You married a food worshiper. You knew what you were signing up for." Her smile softened. "Yeah, and I'd do it again." The cooking show had taken off, bigger than either of them imagined. What started as a quirky local program was now streaming online, with fans sending them recipe requests and marriage advice in equal measure. Adam still laughed at the irony. The guy who once hid behind spreadsheets was now recognized in grocery stores for his legendary whisk fail. But fame hadn't changed the essentials. They still cooked together, argued about oregano, and laughed until their sides hurt. The cafe thrived, not just because of the show, but because Susan's food was magic, and Adam never stopped telling the world about it. Later that evening, they sat on the porch with glasses of fruity Merlot, watching fireflies dance in the twilight. Susan rested her head on Adam's shoulder, and he felt that familiar surge of gratitude, the kind that made his chest ache in the best way. "Do you ever think about how we got here?" she asked softly. "All the time," he said. "If you told me 2 years ago that I'd be married to a woman who makes the best chicken parm on earth and co-host a cooking show, I'd have laughed. And now," he kissed the top of her head, "now I think life's messy and perfect." Susan smiled, eyes glinting in the fading light. "Messy and perfect. I like that." Just as the moment settled into quiet bliss, Adam's phone buzzed with a notification. He glanced at the screen and groaned. "Someone just tagged me in a meme. It says, 'When your husband steals your basil for content.'" Susan burst out laughing. "You deserve that." Adam grinned, pulling her closer. "Worth it." And as the stars blinked awake above them, Adam realized something simple and true. Love wasn't about grand gestures or flawless plans. It was about laughter in the kitchen, trust earned one day at a time, and a shared belief that even the messiest recipes could turn out beautiful if you cooked them together.